Hello and a very warm welcome to our webinar for World Vision United on the 25th of June. Very warm welcome to you if you are joining us live, and equally warm welcome if you are catching up on demand. Good morning if you are in London or to the west, and good afternoon if you are further off to the east. I know we had quite a few people joining from all over last month when we first had this webinar. Last month we had a chat through a few different areas, and we had a few different presenters on. Today you've got me, Martin Campbell. I'm the director of the World Vision United programme, and I'm also joined on the webinar by my colleague Helmut Lindell.
Hey guys.
Helmut looks after the product itself, our digital product manager. Now, last time on the stream, we had a chat through the sort of, in general terms, what the platform is, what it's going to do, and sort of where we're up to. And we then dived into sort of some of the areas around how we prioritize what we're building into the platform, and how that, how each feature and an idea moves through that process. And we had an extremely useful Q&A, so thank you for everyone who contributed to that. I hope that we managed to answer all the questions satisfactorily. We did follow up offline with those that we weren't able to get to on the call itself. This month we're going to actually just dive into a couple of areas in a little bit more detail. So you just have Helmut and myself on the call today. My colleagues are watching and will be able to respond to questions offline as well. First of all, we're going to take a look through the marketing framework that we're going to be using, that we're going to be implementing in the United platform. And that, sorry, I'm getting an error from my stream, but I'm sure that Ben is going to tell me if there's any problem with that. Anything an Okay, I've cleared the errors this end. I'm hoping that that will reconnect the stream, and I can see things are moving again. Okay, there is about a 20-second delay between the things that I say here and that all coming through to you on YouTube, and so when I sort of stop and sort of take a pause, then there's a little bit of a delay there. We're using some different equipment, so I'm hoping that that's all going to be okay. I'm going to start again, and I'm seeing some good messages that say we're back to normal, so I will take that as a good indication to continue, and my colleagues will shout if that's not the case. So apologies for the disruption. We're going to be looking, as I said a moment ago, at the race framework. This is really intended if you are a marketing director, if you're a CEO, if you're a senior manager tuning in and trying to understand how are we going to bring to life our framework for analytics, and how will that help me take what currently looks like a bit of a jumble of numbers and make that into really useful business insight that I can use to drive decisions about where I make investments and how I move forward with my marketing. So I'll be taking you through that. Then I'm going to hand off to Helmut, who's going to have a more detailed look at the standards and sort of principles behind the platform and how they all sort of fit together in terms of the way that we make our decisions and the way that those decisions are delivered into the product. One of the real great things about working in the agile style that we are at the moment is that we can move so quickly, and that means that things can move through extremely quickly, but it also means that we want to make sure that we make the right decisions when things are moving so fast. So Helmut's going to take us a little bit through that. And then finally at the end, we're going to have a chance to just have another Q&A session. We'll pick up any questions that you ask us through the session, and we're also going to be able to answer a few things that came in online after the session last time, which I think probably are useful for everybody to understand, so that we can all have the benefit of hearing the answers to those post questions. So we'll get onto that and we'll see how much time we have at the end. We won't run past the top of the hour, and we may well finish before then, seeing depending on how many questions we have and how far we get through these other areas. Before I dive into the content, I do just want to thank everyone that's been working as part of the World Vision United community, both those of us that are on version 3 still working through that world, those of us that are working on the version 4 platform. It's been, obviously for us as for everybody, a tremendously difficult time to be working to try and remain focused on our own work and on obviously benefiting those that we serve. And I just want to credit the team for managing to stay on schedule with the schedule we set back in February before the COVID crisis emerged, and to continue to work at a really high rate. You've done a fantastic job, everybody. Thank you. And thank you everyone who's contributed as a part of that community. Really, really, really pleased with that. So let's dive into our first topic of the day, called rather appropriately race, but in this case not the global movement to end racial inequality. Love to talk about that, but this isn't the topic of this webinar. So let's talk about the race framework which we've adopted across the partnership to understand how we can acquire supporters, bring them into our world and help them to form a relationship with those that we serve in the field and in different environments around the world. Now, this is important for us to get a grip on, because what quite often happens, I think, is that we get hung up on trying to sort of go into details in technical teams, and I'm certainly guilty of that, and that can sort of lead to lots of quite confusing numbers coming out. And then at SLT level, at senior team levels, talking with our directors, talking with our chief executives, we have to boil things down to kind of, well, sum up how we're doing overall, and we don't really have a good common framework for doing that. Now, the race framework that we've adopted across the organisation does give us actually a really good framework to use for those high-level conversations. Excuse me. And so it's for that reason that we've built in that framework really at the heart of the United 4 platform, and made it so that everything that happens on the platform automatically gets attached, if you like, to that framework, so that we can understand, everybody can understand what's going on, what's successful, what actually isn't so successful, so maybe we should move on to something else. So in order to do that, it's really important to understand how we are tackling the idea of analytics within the platform itself. So when we started building United 4, we took a really important lesson from United 3, which was that whilst in United 3 it is entirely possible to build out a really good set of analytics and an understanding of what's going on the site, you needed a lot of skill and actually a lot of hours to make that happen, and it was something that sort of had to be done on top of the work of communicating with our supporters. So what we decided for United 4 was that we'd take these objectives through our analytics approach. We wanted it to be built into the platform, so that whenever anybody sets up a piece of content, be that a web page or an email or a social media post or whatever that piece of content is, that we know what that is supposed to do, and by knowing what it's supposed to do, we can therefore measure whether it has done that, connect it with the analytics platform. Having said that, we didn't want to move away from our standards-based approach. Now, Helmut's going to talk about this later, but the global standard, both in the partnership and in the industry for analytics, is Google Analytics, in terms of Google Tag Manager and Google Goals and the tools that go with that for optimization. So we didn't want to kind of think we could do better than that. We absolutely need to use those tools. But we do have some particular things about this site which are a little different from the way that many of the sites that would use Google Analytics work. And this is where we just need to supplement Google Analytics with a little bit of extra intelligence to tell it the things that it needs to know in order to present us with good information about whether our marketing dollars are turning into really useful engagement with our supporters. And those two things are really that across our whole footprint of United, what we need to be able to do is to take a piece of content that's been shared across the platform and track how it does right across the whole global platform that it's been delivered on, including its translations into different languages. And we also need to take our user experience experiments and track those across the entire platform. The sizes of organisations using World Vision United are very varied. We have some very large, busy countries with busy websites, and some countries that are just getting off the ground with digital marketing. Now, when it comes to running user experience experiments, what we have there is a vital activity is to test for users what's the most valuable user experience for them to have. Is a big picture better? Is more text better? Many questions like that. Now, the more people we have using a platform, the quicker we can get to those results. So clearly, if we can take our entire global footprint of United and run the same experiment across the whole platform, we'll be able to get results incredibly quickly, which is not only good for sort of general practice, it's also incredibly helpful when, for example, we're preparing our disaster response and we want to understand what's the best way to communicate what's going on in a rapidly changing environment. So we needed to deliver all of those. And in looking at the way that things were set up previously, we saw, and I'm realizing I haven't turned my slides on, so I'm going to switch over to my slides here. We saw that Google Analytics itself is actually a little bit tricky when it comes to getting the detail out. We have quite a lot of information presented in a way which is really very complex. So if I show you an example of that, you can see here that this is the slide from the UK Google Analytics setup. It's all set up, as per partnership standard, and a lot of data is coming out of here. We've got goals set up, we've got performance against those goals, we can measure trends over time, year-on-year growth, and we can see which activities lead to which goals. But the challenge with it still is that actually that still needs to be translated in order to turn into, so how do we do this month? It still needs a little bit of work. And what we want to do is to use a framework to really shortcut that and get that answer a little bit more quickly and easily. So we do that using the framework. So rather than coming bottom up as we would with something like Google Analytics, we want to go top down and say, do you know what's the important stuff first? Now, the RACE framework, and this is widely used across the industry. I wonder with current sensitivities, it may have its name change, which would be interesting. I know it's not perhaps a pejorative thing, but in this case, the name actually is made up of the letters of the stages, and what these stages represent is the stages of a customer journey, or in our case, a supporter journey, which would enable somebody to move through from not knowing anything about World Vision and our work to being a raving fan. And the 4 stages are really clearly marked out here. The reach stage is where somebody first finds out about us. Then in the act stage, they get to know us a bit and maybe take some actions to indicate some sort of interest. Then in the convert stage, they sign up to a regular giving product. That's when they actually become, if you like, a paid up World Vision supporter. And then finally, and this is the stage that sometimes we forget about, they become a raving fan, and they'll actually start to bring their friends, their family, their network, their social network into our world and introduce them to World Vision. And of course, we can take them through the same stage. Now, thinking about our marketing activities using a framework like this is incredibly useful, because it's all too easy to just get a little bit too excited about the final stage of this and think, well, our objective is to convert people, therefore the thing we've got to do is get them to sign on the line, and we have to spend a lot of time on that. And if I look at where we spend a lot of time on optimization and on the work that we do, a lot of it is spent there. But actually, we've got to get people there first as well, and that's where a more detailed understanding of reach and act and what they do is really helpful, because we have to take people on a journey, and that journey involves them taking different steps. If we try and rush them, we're not successful, and we've seen that many times. And we also know from qualitative research that the journey from finding out about World Vision and becoming a sponsor or signing up for a regular gift is actually quite a long journey. So we need something to happen in that journey, and that's where a lot of our web content and email content and social content plays a huge part. So what we're going to do with United is to make sure that when you're putting in any piece of content, as well as the specific objectives of the content that you've got to be talking about a particular issue or campaign or whatever, we're also really explicit about what stage of the journey should that piece of content sit in. And we're going to do that by making sure that when you put in a piece of content, you're going to have to pick the stage, and you're going to have to pick it out of the model. So what you might do is to go through and say, right, these are the different kinds of content that I'm going to add in order to make up sort of one complete user journey, if you like. And if I switch back to the slide, you'll see if we fill in some examples here. On the first stage, we're talking about landing pages. We're talking about pages which catch the interest of somebody and reassure them that they're in the right place. And those have a very specific job to do. It's not to get them to convert, it's to start the conversation with them. We then have some content, and this can happen over a period of time, not just in one visit, but some content that has to really focus people in onto the different parts of the journey they need to go on. You know, we're really exploring the idea that in order to journey from being reached to actually converting, what we need to build is really three key things in a person. We need to build their understanding of what it is that we do, so they really understand that. If they think we're a sort of optician charity, they may get the wrong idea. We need to build their trust. We need to make them understand that the work that we do is of very high quality and that the impact really flows to the field very effectively. And we also need to build up their compassion. We need to build up the spark that says, why should I, motivates them, I guess, to give to World Vision right now, as opposed to spend that dollar on something else or some other cause that they care about. So we need to build all of those things in ACT. And what we do there is we ask them to participate in various things. Sometimes it's as simple as read this content. We may go a little bit further and say, well, will you sign up for this email so that we can stay in touch? Or will you subscribe to a social feed? Or will you take some other small action that just indicates your movement forward? And then next time we see you, we'll take you on the next step of that journey. So that's the ACT stage. In the convert stage, we do what we're very familiar with, which is take somebody who's expressed some sort of intent through the journey of becoming a child sponsor or signing up for childhood rescue or any of our other longer-term commitments that we might have in the future. And we have some good work and some good science around how that works, as well as obviously some very good external benchmarks to look at in terms of what big tech companies do to really drive great user experience. And then on the final stage, we've got the opportunity to ask our supporters to go and do something other than support their child or our cause more, and actually to go and do something engaging. Maybe that's to pray with a group of friends, maybe that's to put on an event, or maybe it's as simple as sharing something on social media. But any piece of content we put in may well fit into any of those groups, and it's really important that we know where it's headed, because if we know what it's trying to do, we'll be able to measure whether it's successful. And the way that we measure whether it's successful is we look at the goals that are associated with each stage of that process. So if I just flick across to that slide, that slide thing is proving a little bit slow. So what you can see there is that in each stage we look at different things to measure whether something has been successful. In the first stage, we would bring someone to our content, and what we really want to see is, well, did we kind of land this? Is this the right person? Are they interested in reading more? So we would measure things like bounce rate, like time on site. If somebody arrives and then immediately leaves, that wasn't an effective reach. But if somebody arrives and then goes on to do something else, then that's great. We did our job in reach. That's a tick. We can move them on to the next stage. And I won't go through the rest in detail, but we have similar goals in each stage. But by tagging each of the pieces of content that we put into the platform and each of the pieces of work that come together into the relevant part of the race framework, we're able to measure what it does against all of the goals in that part of the framework right across the whole real estate of the United platform. And that will enable us quite quickly to find which content, which user experiences are most effective at driving great performance in each of these areas. So what I hope that's going to do is make it a much more accessible conversation for everybody to have, to dive into what's going on when it comes to this campaign. Are we getting people through this sort of first stage, but then they're falling off at the second stage? What can we do? How can we use our content in the appropriate way? It's a really exciting area, and it's a huge piece of science that is really at the heart of modern digital marketing. I can see we've got some questions coming in about that already. I'll pick up those on the Q&A a little bit later on. But we've already seen in testing in the countries that I've been working with initially some very exciting results of being able to make very, very marked changes within a particular part of the model, which obviously then flow through into greater success. So that's how the race model is going to come to life in World Vision United, and you'll see those stages referred to in the platform. You'll see reporting and dashboards that appear in the platform that you'll have access to that will refer to that. And of course, what we also want to do is connect this directly to the partnership-wide analytics collection so that data just flows into that in real time, and we're able to see how things perform right across the organisation to find the best ideas, share them as widely as we can. So that's all I'm going to say about the race framework for now. We'll come back to those questions a little bit later on. At this point, I'll hand off to Helmut to have a look at his area of topic for today, which is to look a little bit more into those sort of principles and standards-driven approaches. Helmut, over to you.
Well, thanks a lot, Martin. So we just heard about what we want to achieve regarding the supporter and the journey that they're going on. But from a architectural perspective, our goal at World Vision United is to build a stable and scalable platform that follows the latest best practice. One of our principles states that we use industry standard off-the-shelf tools that get the job done. A lot of companies and initiatives have already put an incredible amount of resources in defining standards, guidelines, and frameworks for concepts such as design or taxonomy or success management. Much of those standards apply to World Vision just the same as they apply to other nonprofits or even for-profit companies. With United 4, we try to leverage as much of those good standards as possible. Here you can see the difference between building from scratch and assembling according to a framework. It might well be possible to create a Star Destroyer from Lego bricks from scratch, but it will cost you a lot of time. You will have to try and fail a lot, and the result will always look kind of weird. On the other hand, if you use Lego Star Destroyer package, Lego has already done all the thinking around the architecture. All you have to do is implement. We try to use existing Lego packages where possible and only build from scratch what differentiates us. And today I want to talk about two of those standards to illustrate the benefits. Firstly, we decided to use Google's material design guidelines to steer our design approach. Google has put together a comprehensive documentation on good practice in terms of website and app design, as well as design components and code components. Consistent and easy to use design is not specific to World Vision or the non-profit sector. Most of what we want to show on World Vision United, from content pages to transaction flows to feed type snackable content, is already covered in Google's templates. We can adjust our colors, fonts, and other properties of the design elements so they match our brand, but we have blueprints for most of the components we need. So using this approach will provide multiple benefits for us. First, we make sure that we do follow best practice as laid out by the digital leaders at Google. Second, all that is provided in material design is already well documented. When we onboard new staff, for example, or staff leaves, we can point new staff to Google's documentation instead of having to explain everything to them or risk losing valuable know-how when staff leaves the organization. And third, when new trends emerge, they will be implemented in material design very quickly. This means we will get the latest implementations for free, and we do not have to update our documentation directly. Secondly, we will use the common data model introduced by Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP to store and organize data. This allows us to build a modular platform with a single logic around data, which can easily be shared across modules. Since Global IT and many offices already work with Microsoft platforms, from Navision to Dynamics, Office 365, and Power BI, Microsoft's framework was the logical choice. And using the common data model holds multiple benefits for you and for us. First, we can build small in the beginning, but still have a predictable data structure. If Global IT or an office work on a separate system and use the common data model, we can be sure our data structure will match when we integrate at a later stage. This will be true even if you work on a part of the system now already that is still out of scope for us, or it's the other way around. Second, Microsoft offers a specific package for nonprofits, which already covers most of our partnership use cases. This means we can use their data model out of the box for our specific nonprofit context. And third, as with Google's material design, we get a ton of documentation for free. This helps with onboarding new offices or staff, saves time we can spend delivering value to our supporters, and limits the potential for inconsistencies in our structure later. I personally have three main takeaways from our approach to standardized frameworks. First, Martin, can you go to the next slide, please? Thanks. First, we make one well-grounded decision to follow a framework. In turn, we can skip endless small random decisions that would cost a lot of energy and create potential conflict between stakeholders. Second, we follow industry best practice. We do not have to reinvent the wheel when building commonly used parts of our system. We can let the Googles and Microsofts of this world do the thinking and concentrate on the implementation here. And finally, this frees up most of our creative energy and resources on the small part of our offering that really differentiates World Vision from the rest of the world. This is where we can build truly original experiences, serve our supporters, and maximize our fundraising. So this is what we do in terms of standards and frameworks. We use other frameworks as well. I'm sure that we will talk more about those in the upcoming webinars, but that's just two highlights that we already use for you to see why we're doing this and how we're doing this.
Martin, we can't hear you on stream at the moment, Martin.
Okay, that's entirely my own fault. Okay, I'm going to wait 20 seconds until that comes back. Right, so my audio is now coming through, so I'm going to start again, just having a few audio issues. There was a very noisy truck reversing outside, and I was trying to get that off of the audio while Helmut was speaking and while we were just wrapping up that session. So apologies for that. we've managed to deliver those sections in the first half an hour of the session, which is fab. Absolutely want to leave the rest of this time open for questions. So I'll start by picking up some that have come through on the on email and other message channels before we have started this. So between last one and this one. I will let Helmut have a little peek down the list while I pick up one of these, and then we'll sort of alternate between and pick up questions and hopefully get through as many as possible as we can. Ben, I can just hear an echo of myself coming through from you, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself your end. And in fact, I can just do that here. There we go. So one of the questions that we had was sort of to try and clarify. Now, we did cover this, but just to exactly clarify. So what will be in the product when it is launched, and what is on the roadmap? This is a question that we get a lot. And of course, it's very early days for the platform yet. It's still pre-release. Version 4 is still pre-release. Version 3 is still the current live platform. So we're not in a position to sort of spill out a lot of detail a long way into the future. But what I can do is just describe what we're going for initially and the next priorities immediately after that. And then you've already seen how we'll go through the prioritization of that in the webinar that we did last month with Helmut. So on launch, we're going to be focused on delivering really good web pages. So it's all going to be about web content, which is the element of the platform that obviously moves across from United 3 before we add the email and social elements, which will come a little bit later. But with the automated analytics that we've already spoken about, so we're going to have great pages with automated analytics, supporting signing up to the 3 core products that are most important to us as a partnership as a whole. So those being obviously child sponsorship, childhood rescue, and disaster response. So that's what we're going for the very, very first release, which will be coming out in Q1 of FY21. After that, a very, very important feature clearly for many offices is going to be the supporter experience for those who have already signed up as child sponsors. So we'll be taking all the learning from Leapfrog, the functionality that we can already have access through from Horizon, wrapping that all up into a My World Vision part of United 4, and I think that's going to be probably the next module that will come out. We'll still have some work to do to complete the earlier releases within the first part of the what we launch initially, because obviously we'll learn and we'll be improving things all the time, but I want to move on to that relatively quickly. And after that, it's really going to be up to us as a community to decide where we go next. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of big products like the gift catalogue, for example, is very big for us, very important for us in the UK. But those importances vary across the partnership, and they vary across the United community. So we want to make sure that we can really respond to everybody's needs there. So once we've released the platform in Q1, we will then actually be in a position to lay out that roadmap, having had a chance to speak in more detail with everyone in the community to figure out what their priorities are to move forward. So that's when we'll do the next update about the roadmap. Helmut, I'm going to hand over to you to see if you can pick up one of those questions for us as well.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. We had one question last time already that we didn't have time to touch on, but that I think I covered in a more general sense. The question was, how are you handling integrations with marketing automation systems? And that is actually something where I shared a little bit about Microsoft's common data model. So all of the data from supporters and transactions, we're going to deliver them into the digital data layer, which is a system based on Microsoft Dynamics 365. And we're using the common data model for storing and handling that data in Dynamics. So if you have any third-party tool that works with that Dynamics and with the Microsoft common data model, and then you should be able to work directly with United 4. You should be able to integrate in a standard way. And you should be able to pull all the data out that we capture within United 4. Martin, over to you for
excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to pick up a couple of questions and sort of squish them together because we've got a couple in a very similar area here. I've got a question from Tia and also from Christopher looking at sort of how we're going to measure X. So Tia's picked up on for the retention aspects. How are we going to measure engagement with the platform? Now this is obviously particularly important when we move into that My World Vision world where we're looking at supporter engagement. So that is absolutely going to be part of measurement. As soon as we are able to deliver that within the platform, that will become part of the analytics model, and we can look at there will be elements of the supporter engagement piece, the My World Vision piece, that will be targeted at different things there. Some things will be targeted at building understanding, and those will be sort of ACT type things. We're asking people to take small actions. Other things will be targeted at asking people to reach out to other parts of their network, and those will be part of the engagement piece. And then of course anything that we do to drive additional income is focused back into conversion. So it all does fit into the model, and that's how we're envisioning it coming together. But obviously we'll be working with you on detail, particularly around the Leapfrog framework, to make sure that we understand how all that fits together and how we differentiate, if you like, new supporters from activity from existing supporters. But then just extending that into Christopher's question, so there are elements of that happen on the website, which is great, but then there are also elements which happen in other platforms. So what about email? What about social? How are we going to track that and tie it all back together? Well, the answer to that is that, initially in the first release, well, in the first few releases of the platform, as we put in the key features around email and social tracking, that we will use the Google Analytics or industry standard equivalent of those sort of analytics tools and pull the data back into our analytics system. So we're not going to try and create a new analytics system. We will use one that's there. If we end up, for example, having MailChimp as a mail partner that has great analytics, we're going to pull the data back from MailChimp and pull it into our analytics tool so that we can display that data alongside our other data. Now, analytics is one of those things that is as much an art as it is a science, because user behavior doesn't always add up and user data doesn't always dovetail perfectly together. But we'll be making sense of that within the platform and trying to make it as presentable as possible to really get those things working together. Over to you, Helmut. Let's see if there's another question we can take.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Martin, for that. One question that we also got last time around and didn't have the time to answer was what happens with particular conventions, for example, in user interface or in messaging or in integrations for particular countries, or maybe for all particular regions that are not global. So as a principle, we designed United 4 as a international and global platform, which means that we adopted standards, the standards that I just talked about, and more standards based on our data architecture, based on our system architecture. So we have a lot of flexibility in the small decisions. Whenever it's possible, we will look for a single global standard that works internationally. And we believe that we have lots of low-hanging fruits, first, that will increase performance internationally across the board. However, sometimes there might be particular conventions that might be different between a region or between a country and another one. So in that case, we will try to find a standardized way across a region, and we will build this regionalization in the platform, but make it available for everyone. When it comes to the requirements that only one country has, we have to realize that there's also another side of the coin to build a global platform. So we have a limit on the level of tailoring that is available on the platform. So what we'll do here is that when we have a requirement that results from legislation or from an external regulation, my prime example is always the Spanish tax ID that has to be in forms so they can process donations. We will implement those. When a country requests other specific variations of the platform, then they have two different options. First, everyone who uses the platform can propose features or changes. If those features or changes are in line with the current best practice, and passes through the triage system that I talked about last month. This will be open to other countries and can be prioritized. So if the community wants that feature, we can build it. And if it delivers improved performance, it will become part of the platform based on the data that we gather. And alternatively, if a feature doesn't progress through this process and not everybody wants it, there will be an option to also participate in another level of the program, to, let's say, have another subscription level on World Vision United and pay for dedicated developer access or for your own developers to be able to contribute to the platform. So you wouldn't be able to change the fundamental way or the basics of how the platform works, but it would give you a bit of flexibility to build something which only makes sense for your one country. It might be worth saying, though, that everything that we want to include in the platform has to pass through the same quality standards as all the core code that we built. So everything has to be tested with supporters to prove that the additional work is delivering a return, and it will only stay in the platform if we have proved that with in-market data. So that's a little bit about how regional and how global the system will be and what kind of flexibility you can get as an office as well. Over to you, Martin, to pick up the next question.
Thank you, Helmut. And also we're saying, I think, that what we'll want to do on one of the later webinars is to have Ria join us on the stream again and to talk a little bit about how to come on board and what the options are in onboarding, which will further unpack that area that you were talking about, Helmut, in terms of, do I want to sort of do some custom things, or do I just want to get on the platform first and see how quickly I can develop in concert with everybody else. But we want to keep that flexibility built in for being able to work both ways. I want to pick up a question here which actually came in before, and then I see there's a great question which actually I want to give Helmut a chance to answer first before I do, because I think he actually has much more experience with working on this platform over a long period of time. So I just want to pick up a simple question we had around integrations. How are we going to handle integrations with marketing automation tools? And also actually in terms of other things. All of the data that's coming from supporters, which is often where these automations have to take place, is being delivered into the digital data layer within the platform. And at the moment, we're looking at using Microsoft Dynamics for that layer. And really that's because whilst it may be a little bit overkill just for a web platform itself, for the sort of basics that we're doing in the very first couple of releases, by the time we start to add email and messaging and social streams and other forms of interaction, we really do need something quite serious to be able to handle and process all of that supported data. Now, it gives us the benefits of the common data model that Helmut talked about a little bit earlier, but it also gives us the benefit that a lot of content tools, a lot of marketing automation tools work with Dynamics, because a lot of organizations use Dynamics. And if we use a common model, then those tools will work out the box on those elements that work within the model. So wherever we extend, because we've got something very special that's very World Vision, we take a risk because we put something in a place that it's not there for everybody else. So that's why we're really determined to follow through this sort of standards-driven model and make sure that all of our content can sit where it would be in any other organization that did the kind of thing we're doing. Which sometimes means sort of bending things a little bit. So, well, we wouldn't call it that, but actually that's what it is. So we're going to use that element of Microsoft's platform. Now, what that means is very easy to come and plug in some of the larger marketing automation tools. You want to come and plug in a Marketo to Dynamics, relatively straightforward technology thing to do. Obviously, you've got the work to understand how you want to use that. But also when it comes to being able to integrate to a lot of other external platforms that we already have, things like iVision, things like Simmer, things like the CRMs that are in existence in other support offices, being able to understand that there's a common model and that data is always going to come back in a common way is really helpful. And we're able to build a very simple, secure and fast API layer, so a programmatic approach, if you like, for those systems to be able to talk directly to our supporter data in the platform, pull that back, understand the transactions that have taken place, connect people with children that they want to support in the field, and pass other information back and forth very simply. So, this is a platform that's targeted at the smaller support offices. So it's not primarily being built in order to host a very large-scale marketing automation system. That's not really the design sort of parameters that we're working within. But by using the common data model and a very industry standard piece of software to do it, we're actually able to achieve that further down the line if that's what's needed. And I would hope that the larger offices using the platform would quickly find that actually this is driving such a lot of activity, such a lot of supporter engagement, that we really want to double down on that investment, because it's now accounting for a huge proportion of our growth, in which case we'll want to make sure we're not limited by those things being in place. Helmut, there was a great question, I think, about what we've learned from 3 and brought across to 4. And as you've spent a lot of time with 3, I wanted to give you a crack at that first. So I'm going to hand that one back to you and hope you've had a chance to look at that.
Well, yeah, thanks, Martin, and thanks, Deborah, for this question. So we actually took a very deep look at United 3 when we started the United 4 project, and thought about what are the good things that we want to take and expand on, and what are things that we can learn from that we might do better in the future. And I think most of the improvements are actually on how we're doing things, not necessarily on what we're doing. So I think one of the major learnings is that marketing or digital marketing is always a combination of technology and marketing. So we cannot build one thing without having a look at the other. So United 3 has been kind of a very broad toolbox that offices can use to do their own marketing. However, what we saw was that if each office still needed to do their own marketing on it, on the one hand, we had to make it very generic and very broad in use. On the other hand, we still needed lots of work and lots of resources from each office to actually build the marketing on the platform. And in addition, there wasn't any leverage of scale that we could have to actually get a better value from more offices. So each office still had to do their own pages, still had to do their own analytics, and so on. So that's something where we fundamentally changed the architecture now, that we have a more streamlined way of doing marketing, and we can actually push out content, and we can push out changes to from a marketing perspective to offices as well. Now, that doesn't mean that you as an office cannot do your own marketing, but you can also benefit from all the global stuff that comes through. That's one change. The other change is in analytics, that we will from the beginning have a roll-up view of the performance of all offices, and we will make it comparable across offices as well, so that if we're doing tests, we can do them across sites and across pages. So we get the scale that we need for testing that most of the smaller offices are currently missing. So that's something I think that will greatly increase what we're and increase the efficiency of what we're doing and the learnings, the speed of the learnings that we will have. I think another major learning is that we will try to build a very lean platform, and we will try to change it very frequently. I think that's a little bit different to United 3 as well, where we try to build a toolbox that has everything in it, and then let each office just, let's say, play around with it and run with it, and try to do as little as possible with actually code changes and development and that kind of stuff, which ended up providing a very complex platform where you could customize everything, but you also needed to customize everything in order to get something working, which was a very complicated editor experience. So we're looking at a very lean setup in the future that improves very frequently, but more in a vertical way than in a horizontal way. And I think one last point that I want to mention that I, especially having worked on both teams, actually value a lot is that we took the development experience or the development know-how in-house. So on United 3, we outsourced all development to vendors and to agencies, and we only had the, let's say, product management and marketing capabilities in-house. For United 4, we actually have the development capabilities in-house. We're working with a team of World Vision employees that actually develop this, which gives us a lot more confidence in what we're doing from a technical perspective, and we're not as reliant on external vendors, which from my perspective improves speed and improves efficiency of what we're doing a lot. So those are, from my perspective, the main benefits. I don't know if you want to add some learnings as well, Martin.
Thank you, Helmut. I mean, as someone who came to the project really at the transition point, I certainly have a lot less experience on 3 than you do, Helmut. So I hesitate to comment too much. The one thing that I do want to say though is that we, you know, when I came to the project as sort of at the sort of transition point, it was very much with an eye to what works really well out of 3. And so what we saw with 3 is that when you iterate user experience, you can get performance improvement. When you iterate content, you can get performance improvement. And we also saw that when you put content in with an intentionality around this is what the content's to do, that really helped people to clarify what was happening. So that was a feature of United 3 to say what kind of page is this. It wasn't as specific as where in the race model does this go, but it took a step in that direction. And that's something that we took directly from United 3 because it's just such good practice to start with the end in mind of the purpose of this page is that I can help a supporter to make this certain step of the journey. But in terms of those improvements, I think, you know, Helmut, you put your finger on it by structuring the team in a different way and by working with some different technologies and some newer technology approaches. What we've really focused on being able to do is to accelerate the speed at which we can iterate changes in both content and user experience by making a shared set of content available, which means that countries without big resources can still have fresh content on all the time, and also by sharing the platform-wide experimentation process, which enables everybody to take part in that, which again wasn't the case previously. So yeah, some big steps forward, and we'll say that, as we say in the UK, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. So as this goes live with our first cohort of countries in Q1, we'll be sharing that journey with you and understanding how these changes actually have changed performance and driven those changes through into positive results. I see we're running towards the end of time, and also that we seem to have sated your appetite for questions, at least for the time being. So thank you everybody who's taken the opportunity to join today, be that online now or later on by checking out the questions and the video on YouTube. We'll be back in 4 weeks' time, exactly the same time, exactly the same day. So we're just running sort of 4 weeks out on Thursday at the end of July. If you're subscribed either to this channel or to the email on the World Vision United Community Hub, which is worldvisionunited.org, then you will receive a personal invitation. And if you are not on Lotus Notes, then the personal invitation will even work. I'm sorry about Lotus Notes users not being able to turn that into an actionable invitation in your calendars. Unfortunately, it's not possible to find a calendaring tool that works with Lotus Notes these days, and the sooner you're all moved across to Exchange, the happier you'll be about that, I'm sure. But a very warm thank you to Helmut. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for all of your wisdom on the project as well, for your contributions today. And all that remains really for me is to say thank you for joining. Please do join us next time as we explore a little bit more, maybe get a peek under the hood of the development work that's happening on United 4. Until then.